Welcome to our tape, Working on the Bit, Sitting, Trot and Canter. So this is really where we bite the bullet and come into the real core of a rider's work with a horse. I often think that there's 1,000,001 possible coordinations the rider could use up there. And out of those millions, there's just a handful that work. And finding those coordinations, I think, can be rather like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Most trainers in their work with a rider almost presuppose that the rider has the needle. After all, they've got the needle. And they try and teach her to sew with it. Now, what I'm really doing here with the riders you're about to meet is showing them how to find the needle, showing them how to organize their body so it can become an effective tool for organizing the horse's body underneath them. In my own quest to learn how to do this, I really wanted to find out how talented riders do what they do and to bring that down to basic principles that I could teach to everybody. The skill of doing this is actually known as modelling, and there was an interesting project that was done some time ago with pistol shooting in the US Army. Originally, the course took 32 hours and it had a 73% pass rate. Now, the modellers went in, they talked to the very best pistol shooters. They tried to work out what they were really paying attention to and what they were really doing. That wasn't, of course, necessarily what they said they were doing. Having isolated these pieces, they then set out to teach them to the recruits. Now, they got the course down to 15 hours and 100% pass rate. But the best bit is that from using 6,000 rounds of ammunition, they got it down to 2,000. Now, in our case of riders, ammunition is horses. If we can learn how to get the fundamentals of this skill of riding and how to bring the horse onto the bit, we make very, very many fewer mistakes, and those mistakes are costly. Without those, riding becomes much more pleasurable, much more enjoyable, much more fun. It's still hard work, of course, and it still takes commitment. So we're going to come along and join Maita here as she's beginning to learn how to focus her attention and how to organize her body so she gets the result she wants from her horse. So this is Maita, who we met in our first tape, Body Balance, the Basics. This is some rising trot work from early on in her lesson, and it shows her well out of balance. She'd certainly land on the riding arena on her backside if we talk her horse out from underneath her, and her feet are so far forward that she has to lean a long way forward to counterbalance this. Now, of course, this inevitably puts her backside far back in the saddle, down in the hollow of the horse's back, which I call the man trap. With her weight concentrated down here, it's inevitable that her horse will stay in this rather hollow movement, whatever else she might do to try and correct it. That's it. And make sure you get yourself to the balance point, Maita. As you've started into trot there, you're not thrusting quite enough forward. That's right. So is his push forward bigger? Sorry, is his push back bigger, or is your push forward bigger?
I think he's pushed back a little.
Yeah, it looks that way to me. And you be very careful you don't slide down the slippery slope down into the man trap there. That's it. And also be very careful with your hand, Maita, because the tendency is for you to, every now and again, I think rather inadvertently, just join him and pull back with your hand, which makes him contract back from the front even more. Maita, like many of the riders I meet, and quite possibly like you too, has a tendency every now and again to panic rather, and to bring her hand rather back towards her crutch. And of course it happens in the moment when the horse's head comes up, he comes above the bit, and she probably thinks, oh my goodness, I can't let that happen. One of the things that upsets me is to see a teacher or a trainer really putting pressure on the pupil and saying to them, get the horse on the bit, make him come on the bit, get him on the bit now, he mustn't have his nose in the air, he must be on the bit. because what happens for the rider is that translates into so much panic that almost inevitably they end up with a hand that draws backwards and tries to pull the horse's head down. Now, what happens very often with that is the horse either pulls back up against the rider and he hollows more, or the horse says, okay, if I have to, I'll bring my head back. But he does it very much like he's scrunched backwards from the front, still with a hollow back. And we never can get the real beauty and fluency of the paces that we get when the back lifts and when the horse reaches into the rein. Now, the truth of the matter is that until these riders begin to trust that making their push forward bigger than the horse's push back and holding themselves out of the man trap is the answer to the problem, until they really begin to trust those responses in the body, they're quite likely to fall back on the old panic reaction. And it takes a lot of faith and training to really be able to push forward with the hand, to ride as if you were pushing a baby buggy, as if the reins were solid rods, and to realize that bringing a horse into carriage has to do with the interaction of your pelvis with the horse's back and not your hand with his head.